All right, everybody. Reading today a little bit of Kant, The Metaphysics of Morals, the little section on lying in man's duties to himself merely as a moral being, and the short little quip that he made on the supposed right to lie from benevolent motives in response to a certain Englishman, I think. But the more famous one is the section on the supposed right to lie from benevolent motives. Uh, but the original in the Metaphysics of Morals is not that much longer. But it does go into a bit of more detail as to what lying is and why Kant thinks it's wrong. So, chapter 2, man's duty to himself merely as a moral being. And by the way, I have a sort of cough, so for those whom it bothers, too bad.
You guys should all assume it's condescending laughter.
Yeah, in joke. All right, so man's duty to himself merely as a moral being. This duty is opposed to the vices of lying, avarice, and false humility, that is, servility. 1. On lying. Section 9. The greatest violation of man's duty to himself, regarded merely as a moral being, the humanity in his own person, is the contrary of truthfulness, lying. Aliud lingua promptum, aliud pictore inclusum herere. Don't know what don't know what that says. I don't know Latin. I know Spanish. Close, but not exact. In the doctrine of right, an intentional untruth is called a lie only if it violates another's right. But in ethics, where no authorization is derived from harmlessness, it is clear of itself that no intentional untruth in the expression of one's thoughts can refuse this harsh name. For the dishonor, being an object of moral contempt, that accompanies a lie also accompanies a liar like his shadow. A lie can be an external lie, mendacium externum, or also an internal lie. By an external lie, a man makes himself an object of contempt in the eyes of others. By an internal lie, he does what is still worse. He makes himself contemptible in his own eyes and violates the dignity of humanity in his own person. And so, since the harm that can come to other men from lying is not what distinguishes this vice, for if it were, the vice would consist only in violating one's duties to others, this harm is not taken into account here. Neither is the harm that a liar brings on himself, for then a lie, as a mere error in prudence, would conflict with the pragmatic maxim, not the moral maxim, and it could not be considered a violation of duty at all. By a lie, a man throws away, and as it were, annihilates his dignity as a man who does not himself believe what he tells another, even if the other idea is a merely ideal person. I assume that means a fictitious person, has even less worth than if he were a mere thing. For a thing, because it is something real and given, has the property of being serviceable so that another can put it to some use. I once had an acquaintance years and years ago who was what would you call it, a compulsive liar. They lied for no apparent reason, with no apparent purpose, just for the sake of lying. And me and my other friends in the circle that related to them were like, what's this person's angle? Like, what's up with it? I don't think I ever took it as Kant did, that, being a liar makes you worse than a thing. But I can kind of see where he's coming from. So here's the first actual little piece of argument about why it's really wrong. But communication of one's thoughts to someone through words that yet intentionally contain the contrary of what the speaker thinks on the subject is an end that is directly opposed to the natural purposiveness of the speaker's capacity to communicate his thoughts, and is thus a renunciation by the speaker of his personality, and such a speaker is a mere deceptive appearance of a man, not a man himself. Truthfulness in one's declarations is also called honesty, and if the declarations are promises, sincerity. But more generally, truthfulness is called rectitude. So here, the first explicit reason for why lying is always wrong is, at least as far as lying to others, the whole purpose of communication is, to make clear messages to get things done in some way or another, whether it be intellectual or anything, or just like the very activity of comprehending each other. Uh, if you're telling a lie, you're just kind of obfuscating the whole thing, and then what's the point of communicating at that point? So if you take the typical Kantian approach of make things a maxim, the whole point of speech is to communicate. Well, if you're communicating falsehoods, are you communicating at all? Not really. Continuing, lying in the ethical sense of the word, intentional untruth as such need not be harmful to others in order to be repudiated, for it would then be a violation of the rights of others. It may be done merely out of frivolity or even good nature. The speaker may even intend to achieve a really good end by it, but his way of pursuing this end is, by its mere form, a crime of a man against his own person and a worthlessness that must make him contemptible in his own eyes. It is easy to show that a man, yeah, it is easy to show that man is actually guilty of many inner lies, but it seems more difficult to explain how they are possible. For a lie requires a second person whom one intends to deceive, whereas to deceive oneself on purpose seems to contain a contradiction. This is an interesting conundrum. Like, can you actually lie to yourself? It's something that I think like logically does not make sense. It does not seem that like it's actually possible.
I mean, could it be something like you're lying to a part of yourself? Like I'm kind of imagining like the consciousness is in some way being separated, and then so like one part like lies to the other or something like that. So if it exists, it'd probably have to be through some sort of like conscious fragmentation.
Right, but then you're literally insane. So I mean, to say you're lying to yourself is kind of a no go because your own consciousness is fragmented into multiple personalities. Like it just is not.
Yeah,
Yeah, it just does
I
not seem possible.
I think I kind of lie to myself in a manner. Look, we can think about this. For years now, I've convinced myself that taxes are due on April 1st, not on the 15th. And the first time was like someone lied to me, and I just believed them. And then I started to hear that it was actually due later, and I intentionally ignored that advice and just assumed that it was wrong and didn't attempt to look into it as a means of tricking myself into continuing to believe the first will get my taxes done earlier. And I will intentionally say the first to myself whenever I'm like not sure when it's due. So it's like, but maybe that's not lying so much as intentionally withholding truth. That is kind of lying. The point is that I used to for a few years like intentionally do my best to convince myself really like on more like the biological level that something was due on a certain date instead of when it was actually due, and was hoping to like take advantage of like the inability to like will absolute truth. I don't know if that's a bit confusing.
Well, I think it might be a little premature to understand what Kant might think of that, because he does say it's not about the outcome. And I might be overstepping here with what he's saying, but there seems to come with it a certain humility to telling the truth. And to be a thinking being is to be true, and to intentionally seek the opposite of this I can kind of see what he means by saying you're worse than a thing if you tell a lie.
No, yeah, the thing about being worse than a thing is just like, well, things can't lie, and the point of a lie is to get something done. I mean, which is why he says like even the fact of speech seems to go against this whole idea of lying. Like the whole point of speaking, even if like your lie goes nowhere, like you just make something up that has no effect on anybody. Like you're going against the very purposes of speech in saying nothing at all, or saying something that's just like a just so story. For what end? I mean, like if you take speech itself as some kind of maxim, it's self-contradictory. you know, to just say nothing at all. Whenever you can. Yeah, I don't know about the lying to yourself thing. I just don't think that's possible. I think like in the case of like purposefully like habituating yourself to just take it as a given and not even check, even if somebody else has told you that actually it's on the 15th or 14th, and instead it's on the first. Uh, I don't know. That's like lying to yourself so much as like you're setting up a good habit of doing things early.
Yeah, it's setting up a good habit, maybe not on the best foundations of honesty, but it's not really lying to yourself. Like on some level, I suspected that my assumption that it was the first was wrong. I just avoided like looking into it because like looking into it would like allow me to slacken up on like my duties.
hmm Let's see. So man as a moral being, Homo noumenon, cannot use himself as a natural being, Homo phenomenon, as a mere means, a speaking machine, as if his natural being were not bound to the inner end of communicating thoughts, but is bound to the condition of using himself as a natural being in agreement with the declaration of his moral being and is under obligation to himself to truthfulness. Someone tells an inner lie, for example, if he professes belief in a future judge of the world, although he really finds no such belief within himself, but persuades himself that it could do no harm and might even be useful to profess in his thoughts to one who scrutinizes hearts a belief in such a judge, in order to win his favor in case he should exist. Someone also lies if, having no doubt about the existence of this future judge, he still flatters himself that he inwardly reveres his law, though the only incentive he feels is fear of punishment. So, inner lies is interesting in that I mean they're basically lies to God. Like who else would you be lying to? You can't really lie to yourself. You know you're lying. Uh, but certainly this aspect of people who outwardly and probably inwardly also pretend to themselves that they're holier than thou, despite them knowing like deep down that they aren't. It is a kind of funny thing, because at least if you're a Christian or or a Muslim or even a Jew, you know that the big guy cannot be given a ruse. So why you would even try is beyond me. It's an act of stupidity. But let me read the beginning of that paragraph. So, man as a moral being, Homo noumenon, cannot use himself as a natural being, Homo phenomenon, as a mere means, a speaking machine, as if his natural being were not bound to the inner end of communicating thoughts, but is bound to the condition of using himself as a natural being in agreement with the declaration of his moral being and is under obligation to himself to truthfulness. That is just a weird sentence. It's too long, but so man as a moral being cannot use himself as a natural being, as a mere means, as if his natural being were not bound to the inner end of communicating thoughts. Okay, that makes sense. So, the fact that you have a body, the fact that you relate to things physically, the fact that you could even speak at all is for the purpose of actual communication. And the whole point of communication is comprehension at the very least. And if you're telling lies, then nobody's comprehending anybody else. So, as if his natural being were not bound to the inner end of communicating thoughts, but is bound to the condition of using himself as a natural being in agreement with a declaration of his moral being, and is under obligation to himself to truthfulness. That second part, I'm just not quite sure about. Okay, but is bound to the condition of using himself as a natural being in agreement with the declaration of his moral being, and is under obligation to himself to truthfulness. So you cannot use yourself as a natural being as a mere means, as if your natural being is not bound with the purpose of communicating thoughts. Okay, so man as a moral being cannot use himself as a natural being as a mere means, speaking machine, but is bound to the condition of using himself as a natural being in agreement with the declaration of his moral being and is under obligation to himself of truthfulness. Okay, that little middle section just kind of breaks the flow, but then if you just skip it, that reads perfectly fine. Okay. So you cannot use yourself as a mean, but the way in which you're bound to the condition of using yourself as a natural being in agreement with the declaration of his moral being and is under obligation to himself to truthfulness. So you are under obligation to be truthful.
Yeah, because you're not just a natural being. You're not just like some being going around. You have the capability of thinking and being moral, thus you must be moral.
Oh, Gremlin 64. I use Foxit PDF Reader. Use it. It's pretty good. The highlighting things are really, really nice and underlines all those things. So continuing, insincerity is mere lack of conscientiousness, that is, of purity in one's professions before one's inner judge, who is thought of as another person when conscientiousness is taken quite strictly. Then, if someone from self-love takes a wish for the deed because he has a really good end in mind, his inner lie, although it is indeed contrary to man's duty to himself, gets the name of a frailty, as when a lover's wish to find only good qualities in his beloved blinds him to her obvious faults. But such insincerity in his declarations, which man perpetrates upon himself, still deserves the strongest censure, since it is from such a rotten spot, falsity, which seems to be rooted in human nature itself, that the evil of untruthfulness spreads into man's relations with other men as well, once the highest principle of truthfulness has been violated. So this is like against white lies. Although, I mean, this kind of reads weird. Like, it seems like a consequentialist thing, though I know he's definitely not a consequentialist, so that can't be it. That insofar as you tell these white lies, even if they are not lies to other people, but even to yourself, to your own conscientiousness, your inner judge, this small infraction nonetheless lays
Yeah,
the.
but I mean,
You go?
yeah, but hold on. Couldn't he be? Yeah. Couldn't he be being consequentialist? Consequentialism is subcategorical. It's a part of deontology.
Well, no, he's made it clear that the ends don't matter. Like, the consequences themselves don't matter. It's the fact of the deed that's something's illogical about it. Like the law, the reason like lying is straight up wrong in all instances is pretty clear. Uh, it violates the whole form of the categorical imperative in that, well, if you're allowed to lie, you know in any circumstance, based on some perception of yours as to what the facts are, in which you think that your lie will lead to a certain consequence that is better,
Mhm.
then anyone can do this at any time, and you wouldn't be able to actually trust communication.
But what if you lie for good reason?
He'll actually go over this like right after this.
Yep.
Okay.
So, remark. It is noteworthy that the Bible dates the first crime through which evil entered the world not from fratricide, Cain's, but from the first lie, for even nature rises up against fratricide, and calls the author of all evil a liar from the beginning and the father of lies. However, reason can assign no further ground for man's propensity to hypocrisy. Although his propensity must have been present before the lie, for an act of freedom cannot, like a natural effect, be deduced and explained in accordance with the natural law of the connection of effects with their causes, all of which are appearances. So Kant doesn't know why we have the irreducible element of rascality, as Alan Watts calls it. Hegel does, though. Like for Hegel, the element of hypocrisy, or why we lie or why we do evil in the first place, is because we have an element of finitude in us, which is actually necessary. You need the infinite to have a moment of finitude, which is just for that moment self-absorbed and has itself for its own end abstractly, for anything to really exist at all. But we are not just finite beings. So we also are infinite, and so we can come to cognizance of our own finitude and our own finite ends or purposes, so that we can come to know what is right and what is wrong, what is evil and what is good, through knowledge of what is infinite and what is not, what is more universal and what is not, up to like the highest universality, which is God and the good itself. All right, casuistical questions. Can an untruth from mere politeness, for example, the "your obedient servant" at the end of a letter, be considered a lie? No one is deceived by it. An author asks one of his readers, "How do you like my work?" One could merely seem to give an answer by joking about the impropriety of such a question. But who has his wit always ready? The author will take the slightest hesitation in answering as an insult. May one, then, say what is expected of one? If I say something untrue in more serious matters, having to do with what is mine or yours, must I answer for all the consequences it might have? For example, a householder has ordered his servant to say, "not at home," if a certain man asks for him. The servant does this, and, as a result, the master slips away and commits a serious crime, which would otherwise have been prevented by the guard sent to arrest him. Who, in accordance with ethical principles, is guilty in this case? Surely the servant, too, who violated a duty to himself by his lie, the results of which his own conscience imputes to him. And that's the end of the section on lying. Now, on the supposed right to lie from benevolent motives, he's going to expand on this example, and he's going to make it even more extreme. And people do ask this. It's like, well, why are you responsible for everything that comes about through your lie, but why aren't you held responsible for everything that comes about through your truth? But I'll get into that after this. On the supposed right to lie from benevolent motives by Immanuel Kant. In the work called France, from the year 1797, Part 6, Number 1 on political reactions by Benjamin Constant. The following passage occurs on page 123. Quote, the moral principle that it is one's duty to speak the truth, if it were taken singly and unconditionally, would make all society impossible. We have the proof of this in the very direct consequences which have been drawn from this principle by a German philosopher, who goes so far as to affirm that to tell a falsehood to a murderer who asked us whether our friend, of whom he was in pursuit, had not taken refuge in our house, would be a crime. End quote. The French philosopher opposes this principle in the following manner, page 124. It is a duty to tell the truth. The notion of duty is inseparable from the notion of right. A duty is what in one being corresponds to the right of another. Where there are no rights, there are no duties. To tell truth then is a duty, but only towards him who has a right to the truth. But no man has a right to a truth that injures others. And the something Greek, which I cannot read, because I am not classically trained. Oh well. The Greek thing here lies in the statement that, quote, to tell the truth is a duty, but only towards him who has a right to the truth, end quote. It is to be remarked first that the expression, quote, to have a right to the truth is unmeaning. Funny, fancy way of saying meaningless. We should rather say a man has a right to his own truthfulness, veracitas, that is, to subjective truth in his own person. For to have a right objectively to truth would mean that, as in meum and tum generally, don't know what that means. Let's see if I can. It's Latin. Does this have a Latin thing? Nope.
Me and what is mine? Or what is mine and what is thine? What is yours? What is mine?
Yeah, that was my guess. So mine and thine.
Yeah.
So mine and yours. It depends on his will whether a given statement shall be true or false, which would produce a singular logic. It's kind of strange. So for to have a right to objective truth would mean that, as in mine or yours, it depends on his will whether a given statement shall be true or false, which would produce a singular logic. I mean, would this just be like one of those like he said, she said kind of moments? Where like, how could you prove the truth beyond your own perception of like the event? In which case, like to say you have the right to truth is kind of meaningless because as far as the truth can be determined, it's based on your will and your cognition of the event. I'd say, like, for example, suppose you claim that, you saw a UFO, but nobody else was around and your camera just happened to malfunction. What would the right to truth mean in that beyond your own assertion that it is true? And, your adamant claim that it is. So, I mean, on this level of detail, yeah, I can see, like, Kant's problem with this. That, like, the right to truth, it only makes sense for, like, things that are publicly accessible to a certain extent. Where there is no public access, such as just, a he says, she says situation, what does it mean other than, the right to truthfulness insofar as you see it? And it would just be the right to tell your truth, insofar as you understand it. So now, the first question is whether a man, in cases where he cannot avoid answering yes or no, has the right to be untruthful. The second question is whether, in order to prevent a misdeed that threatens him or someone else, he is not actually bound to be untruthful, in a certain statement to which an unjust compulsion forces him. Truth in utterances that cannot be avoided is the formal duty of a man to everyone, however great the disadvantage that may arise from it to him or any other. And although by making a false statement I do no wrong to him who unjustly compels me to speak, yet I do wrong to men in general in the most essential point of duty, so that it may be called a lie, though not in the jurist sense. That is, so far as in me lies. That is, so far as in me lies I cause that declarations in general find no credit, and hence that all rights founded on contract should lose their force, and this is a wrong which is done to mankind. So this is an odd one in which I do think that there are ways that people like look at this and go like that just doesn't seem to make sense. Like, why can't you make specific maxims for lying, and why is lying itself just a general maxim as such? Such that, yeah, insofar as you lie and you say, well, I can lie whenever I see fit, for that my subjective knowledge leads me to believe certain things are going to happen, and therefore I have a right to lie based on that. And that in that scenario, well, then you can expect that generally of everybody. So whose word can you really take on trust anymore? Because as far as it goes, you do that to everybody, and everybody can do that to you, and what they deem to be a proper reason for lying may be different for yours. Some people are a bit more on the selfish side. Some people are, more of on the what do you call it? When you kind of do favors for family. What's that word?
Nepotism.
Yeah, nepotism. Some people lie on those reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. With jobs, I see it all the time. People lie.
Oh, yeah.
People lie for their cousins, their brothers, friends.
Is that how you landed your most recent one?
No, I just
Nope.
got my recent job
I'll fuck with you.
on a good old putting in a random application and talking to a stranger on the phone.
Did you put in that application in a Hegelian way?
Sorry, what?
No, I just said a dumb joke. I said, did you put in that application in a Hegelian way?
No, I put it in a Kantian way, though.
Yeah. Yeah, Hegel thinks we can lie.
So, all right. So if then we define a lie merely as an intentionally false declaration towards another man, we need not add that it must injure another, as the jurists think proper to put it in their definition.
That says lies or a lie is false speech to the detriment of another.
Mm-hmm. For it always injures another, if not another individual, yet mankind generally, since it vitiates the source of justice. This benevolent lie may, however, by accident, become punishable even by civil laws, and that which escapes liability to punishment only by accident may be condemned as a wrong even by external laws. For instance, if you have by a lie hindered a man who is even now planning a murder, you are legally responsible for all the consequences. But if you have strictly adhered to the truth, public justice can find no fault with you, but the unforeseen consequence, what it may. It is possible that whilst you have honestly answered yes to the murderer's question whether his intended victim is in the house, the latter may have gone out unobserved, and so not have come in the way of the murderer, and the deed therefore have not been done. Whereas if you lied and said he was not in the house, and he had already gone out, though unknown to you, so that the murderer met him as he went and executed his purpose on him, then you might with justice be accused as the cause of his death. For if you had spoken the truth as well as you knew it, Perhaps the murderer, while seeking for his enemy in the house, might have been caught by neighbors coming up and the deed have been prevented. Whoever then tells a lie, however good his intentions may be, must answer for the consequences of it, even before the civil tribunal, and must pay the penalty for them, however unforeseen they may have been, because truthfulness is a duty that must be regarded as the basis of all duties founded on contract, the laws of which would be rendered uncertain and useless if even the least exception to them were admitted. To be truthful, honest in all declarations is therefore a sacred, unconditional command of reason and not to be limited by any expediency. Therefore, even if your lie could save your friend, you're not allowed to lie. Which is why people think Kant is nuts and that there's something deeply wrong with this. Now, like, I think. Oh, if somebody's going to say something, go ahead.
Oh, I was just like gonna ask, like, so what is he talking about? It's just like you should just tell the truth no matter what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
But like, what if it's like to save a life?
Well, he said, what if, that's why he gives the example. Well, what if you tell a lie and your friend, just kind of assumed you were going to tell the truth, because you're an honest person like he is.
Mhm.
And like the murderer is. And,
Isn't that kind of similar to like maybe the axiom that Socrates posed of like, like what is just? And he like makes the example of is it like just or whatever to like, give your friend his sword back, like that you borrowed, but then what if you knew that your friend was crazy and he was gonna use that sword to like kill someone? Like, would that be just? And it's just like,
I don't think those are the same, but it's another type of duty to your friend to not
Right.
let him harm himself, or
yeah,
I thought you were gonna say
kind
to
of just like,
do good to your friends or
it's like I was thinking of like an example, like say like during the Holocaust, and like you're a person who is like non-Jewish or whatever, and you're hiding Jews, and like the Gestapo goes to your house and be like, "Hey, are you hiding Jews in here?" And you lie.
yeah, you have to say yes.
Well,
according to
okay,
Kant.
in this situation, you have to say yes, but you're trying to
Well,
protect.
yeah. I mean, he's consistent at least. We'll give him that, but he's consistent to a fault. We think,
But
or
that's
I think,
mean.
huh?
Kant doesn't care about your feelings. He has no
Yeah, he
feelings.
doesn't care about whether or not the
They're my
lie
Jewish
has
friends, and they don't
quote, unquote,
deserve to go
positive
to the
outcome.
gas chambers. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Kant never like considered the Holocaust, so
believe
his
me,
point
he
is
did.
Oh, he knew.
Oh, he
Oh,
did.
yeah, he knew. He considered all sorts of things.
He knew about the black situation in
maybe
America.
he needed just like some Jewish friends. Maybe he would change his mind.
I mean, he did read Jewish authors.
Were they his friends?
He didn't have friends.
See, they're your problem. How can you be a philosopher if you don't even have any friends? Like, you're not even human.
Yeah.
But does he know anything about the human condition? He doesn't have friends.
Yeah, no.
All right.
Irrespective of that, there's something else I've heard, and this also makes sense that it goes with this issue. Another reason that you can't lie is that by lying, you are not respecting the moral autonomy of the other person to make their own judgments and choices based on the factual relevant information. Supposing that you were to lie to somebody about something actually important. And through that lie, they ended up making some kind of judgment that leads them to ruin. Or, suppose, they come to your door and they're like, is your friend here? We think he's a Jew hiding under the floorboards. And you're like, no, but, There's an empty
Hmm.
house down the street. I think there's a bunch of Jews there, even though you yourself, as far as you know, don't think that there are actually any Jews down there. It's a rundown, dilapidated place. And so you think you're just misdirecting them. Well, what if by your lie, you end up getting, there happen to actually be Jews hiding in that place, and you get them all killed? Kant's whole thing is like, well, now you're responsible. you know,
But it's coming from a place of ignorance because they didn't know that there's Jewish people there.
right. But had you told the
It's being-
truth, which you do know, you could have at least taken responsibility for the fact that, the world is as it is. You're just telling them the relevant facts. What they do with it is their business. Every person has their own moral judgment that they have to deal
But
with.
it's not their business only. It's also the business of
Right,
the
but like
person telling the
suppose you
lie.
got people killed inadvertently through a lie. Aren't you responsible?
But what if your lie saves a life? That's the whole point.
Yeah, but if you
Like,
got somebody
just as-
else
just as
innocently
well
killed,
that a lie can like compromise someone's life, it can also like potentially save someone's life. So
You're not thinking like a Kantian.
I don't care.
no, but like, the point is good though. Like suppose like through a wanting to do something nice, you end up doing a wrong, which actually happens all the time, by the
Right.
way.
Yeah.
You know,
I
plenty
can
of
understand
people
that.
happen to do
Think
this.
they're doing good, The road to hell is paved with good intentions, all that jazz. I get it.
Yeah, and it's not just thinking you're doing good. You think you're lying, but you think your lie is a good lie.
Hmm.
But you end up being deadly wrong about the facts. So, so insofar as you tell the truth, the reason you're not responsible for everything is, well, the facts are the facts. What you can expect of a decent, honorable human being is that, their word counts.
It's like I'm trying my best, okay? I'm only human.
yeah, the word counts. But if you tell a lie knowingly, you are now implicating yourself as the linchpin of whatever comes after, rather than just like the facts being what they are.
Remember, you're knowingly doing it, telling a falsehood to the detriment of the others. You're not like accidentally, I didn't mean to lie or whatever. You're doing it on purpose, with purpose of intent.
I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, is a lie in this case only restricted to the domain of speech, or does Kant also consider acting untruthfully as a lie?
That's one thing I've read other people say, that you can get away with just wasting
not
their
saying-
time and not answering directly. Because technically, you're not being untruthful, and you're not denying them what they want. You're just kind of being circumlocucious.
I mean, what seems weird to me about the situation is, and maybe you'll know better if you know more Kant, but it seems unclear to me with the categorical imperative, you're supposed to act in a way that is supposed to be universal. How much of the circumstance can be involved in it to be a universal action? Because you could say universally, you shouldn't tell the truth if it gets people killed, because people shouldn't get killed, and that's like a universalizable action.
Yeah. That's one of the things people bring up about like why is this so broad for Kant? Why can't you just have like more local maxims? And I think that the answer is tied to the place that he puts lying at. It's the very first one on like the duties to oneself as a moral being as such. That the basis of all virtue is downstream to honesty. That if you have some aspect of dishonesty to yourself, that little point of inconsistency makes everything downstream of that liable to inconsistency, so that you are not really a trustworthy person whose word is binding. And people can go say, I know what this person says is exactly what it is, insofar as they know it. It's one of those things. It's like jealousy. Like once you let it in, it poisons everything, and now everything's under question. But yeah, it's an odd one. It is so fundamental, so foundational to him. Like it is just under no circumstances allowed. Now I've been thinking about this a little bit. I was actually looking through the philosophy of right, but I don't think Hegel has anything on it. Any philosophy of right. Uh,
About honesty.
yeah, on lying. It's definitely not in morality, and it's definitely not part of the ethical life.
Well, I mean, Hegel was known for lying. He
did lie.
He was lying with his landlady.
Yeah.
He would lie with another man.
Okay, I thought you were going to bring up the thing about the jail
I
where
would
like he
not
tried
be
to break
lied
a
to.
student out.
Did that like get him a discount on rent? Or I feel like that has to like make rent cheaper.
Hegel was like turning tricks.
Yeah, he had an illegitimate child with one of his landladies.
Turning tricks. You gotta do
Nah,
what you gotta
that kid
do.
had a
Right.
shitty life.
AW's great 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 grandfather.
Oh, wow.
Her name was Christiana Burkhardt, so maybe we could find a Burkhardt. Find out who he is.
Yeah, no, there's nothing online.
Well, Hegel raised the kid as his own. It's not like he was a bastard kid.
Yeah, but that was like later in his life.
Georg.
And then he didn't send him to college like his other kids.
Yeah.
He joined the military and ended up dying.
Yeah, he died in 31. Same year. As Hegel.
But anyways, that is interesting that in the one work that is supposed to be about morality and ethics, he doesn't seem to talk about lying. Part of it is probably because Hegel doesn't see the issue as ultimately that important. There is a way, like there's a section, I don't know which one, it's probably about somewhere in intention, but there's a difference between what you intend and what actually happens. Such that even if you have a good will, even if you have the best knowledge to your capacity and available to you, there are things in your deeds that are going to go beyond anything you know and intend, such that the consequences of your actions will be your fault, positive or negative, but it's beyond your control. Now, I haven't read
Kant?
You good?
I was gonna say, didn't Kant fucking say that all black people are born white and the blackness grows out of their belly button, though?
I have no idea.
He didn't
Yeah,
know
I'm pretty-
what he was saying.
That's the first time.
He didn't realize that he was lying.
He didn't, yeah, okay, I guess he didn't realize. You could have, like, fucking asked a question. You could have, like, sent a letter like, hey, we're going to Africa. Can you, like, figure this out for me? How do you just assume that?
In German, African and belly button are the same word. I'm just
No, yeah, I don't know about that. Like apparently in those lectures, like I like Daniel Pascal Zorn gets in these fights all the time on Twitter for the last couple of years since it's the whole Kant is racist thing has been a thing for about like the last 5 years, it seems.
Well, but Kant
Germany.
said it himself. Ich bin nicht Rassist.
Well, no. And like, and the idea is just like Heidegger, where they want to say that Kant's philosophy itself, that ontologically, metaphysically, Kant's philosophy is racist, which is a load of nonsense. Nobody's ever proved it. Like it just doesn't make any sense.
Lying.
As far as the racist stuff
lying
goes,
is now telling the truth is not racism.
Yeah. As far as the racist stuff goes, apparently, and I don't know about this, but I'll take Zorn's word for it. Zorn says most of these claims are severely taken out of context, in which Kant is literally quoting someone else and saying, I'm quoting somebody else, and then commenting on it. And people just cite it as if Kant himself said these
Right.
things.
It's
And
like when I
so-
Like,
quoted that
I
Burger King
heard
guy.
that black people are actually white. They've been lying to people this whole time. They've been black just to get on people's nerves.
Yeah, so I don't know how much that whole spiel will stick ultimately.
Some people think.
Hmm.
Josh, do you have that picture? Did you save it?
No.
I'll have to remake it.
The one of you where you're in makeup?
No, the one where I wait. Fuck you. The one where I did the AZ quote of Kant saying, "I'm not a racist." It took me like 2 minutes, but I was trying to find.
What
Take
book
me
is
longer to
this that
find
you
it
guys
when-
are reading? What
Huh?
Kant book?
It's
What Kant book is this?
metaphysics of morals.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Metaphysics. What is metaphysics? I don't know.
Metaphysics
I
is
think there's a
just
stream where Haas was explaining like metaphysics.
Kant,
and I
or
wasn't
actually-
paying attention.
metaphysics is that which is literally after physics.
Okay.
Or
I thought it was
if you think about it, it's
the physics
prior
of
to
the
physics.
physical, or the physical of the physical.
No, that's not. That doesn't really make any sense. Metaphysics is just basically anything that's not physical. So if you're talking about things that literally are not physical objects, you're talking about
Okay.
metaphysical objects.
Like air. Wait, no,
Yeah.
air is a physical.
No, air is physical.
Air is
I
physical.
don't think air is. I think air is physical.
No, like you're talking like the form of a chair. Like the form of a chair is not physical. It's something conceptual, ideational in your mind.
Mhm.
Even feelings,
Like a
in a
thought.
way, are not physical.
Yeah.
And so if you take
Like
metaphysics,
Kant
literally
is
just
metaphysics
that
is
which
logic.
is.
We don't agree.
Or maybe a cloud, a rainbow. Rainbows aren't physical.
No, those are
Wait,
physical.
are they?
Yeah. they're
No,
physical.
yeah, it's atoms. Yeah.
Well, it's not about atoms. It's
Uh,
like that the relationships by which we perceive them are physical ones. So
Yeah.
A daydream.
Whether or not it's what they're made of or what they appear to, like physically to us. We don't experience the atoms as such. We experience the congregation of atoms. So that's all physical. Metaphysics is anything that's not that.
Okay.
yeah. I mean that's just taking the word quite literally at its etymology, but like, as most people mean it, metaphysics as such is just basically all these things that you would normally consider to be purely grammatical in some way, like subjects, objects. There's no such thing as objects out there. Object is a concept. There's no such thing as subjects out there. The subjects are a concept.
Yeah, but I mean, classically, for most of philosophical history, for most of philology, philosophy or metaphysics just meant first principles or first determinations. So whatever determinations in a system underlie it as its base or foundation or where it starts, in the way we would understand the world, those would be metaphysical. So, for example, existence as such would be metaphysical, or being as such would be metaphysical, or relationship as such would be metaphysical. These would be metaphysical things in that understanding.
They're foundational.
Yeah, well, because systems would be based on them, they'd be first principles or first determinations.
Oh, okay.
So metaphysics traditionally has just meant the rules or the determinations that have underlied everything else. And the point was, is if you study metaphysics and you have a good metaphysics, so you know the rules, then you can know you can understand what the whole system is based on, and thus have a much better grasp of the system itself. Have a basis for the system to grasp it.
Like the system of anything, or just
Of everything.
like the specific
Of everything. Of the world.
system of the world. Okay. Mm, it's kind of cool.
Anyways, as for lying, actually, wait, Hegel talk about this. I think Hegel does talk about this a little bit in the introduction of the philosophy of right, because I think he talks about the whole thing about you can't lie people into truth.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I keep doing it, so
No, but like, I feel like the
True.
science of logic, for example, is a bit of lying to get you to the truth.
Those are lies, Josh. As in,
No,
your
but like,
words are lies. How dare you?
do you get what I mean when I say that?
No.
Like, the science of logic is totally true, but there's a little bit of like pretending that goes on a little bit.
Is it pretending, or is it just the case that you are not yet privy to how it's supposed to go, so he doesn't let you already know before you know? I mean, it's like what I think about the phenomenology spirit, where I think the phenomenology spirit is something you could consider as, true falsehoods or false truths, depending on how you see it.
Yeah.
But it's not a case of lying. It's a case of the person reading it misunderstanding it, and the consciousness being described itself misunderstanding its own conceptions and limitations. Such that, things are false insofar as you mistake the true to only be a part. And that's what falsehood is. But if you're
Yeah.
true to the falsehood, you end up being true anyways. But then you can't consider that a lie. It's a moment of ignorance, but ignorance is not, itself wrong unless you obstinately stick to being ignorant even after you know it to be wrong.
Yeah. Well, okay, so it's not lying, but it is partially like you're supposed to be ignorant for it to work the way it's supposed to work. And so you're not being lied to, but some stuff's being hidden from you until you make your way up to the top. And now what I don't understand is for Kant, like secrets. How does he feel about secrets in terms of lying?
You'd be lying if you said you would keep a secret and didn't. So I think that would supersede.
Yeah, that probably was promises. Like he mentioned that there were promises. And he does talk about promises somewhere.
Josh, are you like getting at like not giving the full truth immediately? Because it's like
no.
Okay.
No. Oh, are you talking to me?
No, to Josh.
Oh, which one?
There's like
You
five
assholes.
Joshuas in here. What happened?
Okay.
I'm seeing quadruple, quintuple.
All right, I'm sorry. I didn't change everybody. I was going to, but I was like, nah.
Did everyone who was memeing. Also, I didn't notice what you were talking about at first. God fucking. Am I lying right now by being Josh AU?
Yeah. Josh AU.
Josh AU.
Josh AU.
AU. That's what it is.
It's Josh Gold. Josh Gold. No, I'm just kidding.
Josh Gold.
JOSHAU.
Yeah, it's Ow. Josh Ow.
Josh Ow.
Yeah.
Josh Gold.
The fuck? The fuck is my question? lying or like not giving the full truth, because it's like if I have a kid and they want to eat a bunch of cookies and like no, like I'm not giving the full truth of like you'll rot your teeth out and you'll be a fat ass and no one will like you. But like, is that? Oh, that's actually not a good example. As I say it aloud, I don't think like giving them like partial truth and then the whole that will lead you to the whole truth later on is like a lie.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Like if you didn't say you'd suck my dick, but you were like, you're fairly handsome.
So I guess like what I mean is, okay, so we established that that's the case. That's right. What does Kant mean when he says you can't lie to get someone to the truth? Like, in what other sense would someone mean that?
It would count in the sense that like, you play a deep ruse on people. Like suppose it'd be like running a Christian church in which you progressively, slowly, like you present yourself as a typical Christian church, and then but somehow you sneak in these doctrines that are actually atheistic and all these other things, and the whole thing is like you're going to make them an atheist at the end. Um, when people figure out that what you're actually up to, like they joined the church originally to become Christian, well, not to become Christians, but because they usually are already Christians. So you're not really going to end up converting anybody. Like if you make some kind of comedic thing, just like lampooning philosophy, and then through that you think you're going to be underhandedly like actually doing philosophy and getting people interested in philosophy, well, you're not actually going to do it. I mean, sure, maybe a very rare few will like be appreciative of that, but the majority of people will just realize what you're doing and they're going to think you're stupid. It's like the best example I come up with that I know of actually is infrared, which tries to be a movement about radicalizing people into actual communist politics of some sort. But they bring in people through a circus show, basically. And then what do you know? All the people there don't actually watch because they actually care to learn or anything. Insofar as I've ever noticed Haas trying to teach anything, people don't really watch it. If he's not up to his antics, people stop watching. So what does he keep doing? Just keeps on with the antics.
Weirdly enough, just because I know infrared, not like personally or anything, but I've interacted with him so much. Unfortunately, one of the big reasons that he's seen such like a big stagnation in his growth or whatever, obviously partially because he was like banned on Twitch and whatever, and he's relegated to fucking YouTube lives, which seen there isn't too big. It's actually more so that he's sort of delved more into the circus stuff. I feel like he's done recently, like the past 2 to 5 months, just done like culture war shit, um, just weird discourse about baristas or something like that. But when it seemed like he was actually teaching people stuff, obviously through a more means of entertainment, quote unquote, but through like debates and stuff where he was still getting like information across, he seemed to be a lot more popular. And he still had a pretty big following when he first moved to YouTube after being banned from Twitch. And he was still doing that sort of debate stuff as much as he could, and seemed to be like teaching people. He has, still probably 20 plus lectures on his channel or whatever, from what I've seen. But it seems, unfortunately, that a lot of his stagnation comes from the fact that he wants to be an entertainer so bad. But I do think, just to maybe speak for good name on infrared, that there are a lot of people there, people that I know personally that are like there to learn, and they've sort of had to move away from infrared in order to learn, just because that hasn't been the place to do it recently.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you'll always catch somebody. I mean, it's like the whole thing with Hegel. There's a lot of false Hegel stuff out there, and with all of it, most people just kind of probably look at it and go like, "Well, this is stupid." some people are themselves, into BS, I would say, and they fall for it, and they're like, "Wow, this is genius." And then some people go like, "Okay, this is kind of interesting. I kind of like where this is going." And they actually look deeper, and they find out later on that what they started with was a bunch of BS, and they actually get into the real stuff. But that's very minor, and I mean, consequentially, I can say that in many ways, I wish that most people didn't know about Hegel at all, just because what they end up being faced by when they look it up is a bunch of stuff that initially should sound crazy. And if it doesn't, that's something very odd and worrisome about to whom that sounds appealing.
Didn't like Hegel like mention this in his preface, where he was just like the most likely people that would consider his writings kind of like bunk are like the experts, quote unquote, but like the common folk, the regular people, would see that like they wouldn't understand what he's saying,
That's
but they
just
would
because
kind of feel like it was important to say.
I think that's just because he has
But
such a
that's
background in philosophy and stuff. Like he has such a
probably.
he obviously sees thought as a development. So it would have to be that you would have to traverse through the philosophy of stuff in order to comprehend what he's saying.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, but like Hegel definitely was not a person who thought that philosophy was for everybody.
Yeah.
So he'd be against this very idea of popularizing philosophy. He actually says a few places philosophy is, by its very nature, esoteric, not because it's hiding the truth for anybody, but because most people aren't going to look at it and they're going to be like, "What the heck is this?" and move on with their life.
Right. Because it's like, what happens if you actually do get Hegel?
Well,
Like Cyrus said.
that guy's never getting Hegel.
Did you?
I think I mean, he gives himself like a lot of flack and stuff, but like he's trying.
Yeah.
Sure, but like trying out what? Like it's one of those things. Like
I don't know.
I don't know why some people become
But
obsessed
if
with
you just get
philosophy.
Hegel, then like everything will just fall into place somehow.
Nah, that's not what happens.
I don't know.
No, not at all.
It's
But
funny.
it could set you in the path.
Yeah, I mean, like
Yeah,
one of the things
but I was
that
trying
happens.
to tell him not too long ago. It's just like, why such an emphasis on Hegel? Because like even you go step further, there's like so many other people after him that like
By the way,
try
your
to go to
mic
toe.
is like having a lot of pop. I don't know if that's
Yeah, there's a bit of
I don't know.
distortion. I don't
Oh,
know if it was
sorry.
just me, but I guess it's.
It might be on my side.
well now it
Sorry.
doesn't.
Okay. So I was like, even like Marx like had something to say against like Hegel's systems and stuff like that. So
Well, even
it's
Marx
like,
hates philosophy. I mean, Marx
not the
didn't want
end
to
all.
philosophy.
Yeah.
Marx is arguably.
like-
I mean, Marx fucking hates philosophy. If there's anything that he derides,
Yeah.
through and through, it is philosophy. He fucking hates that shit.
Also, you're wrong, Saturday. Hegel is the beginning and the end once you understand it.
Okay. I'm just saying it's not the end all be all.
It's the end all, be all, literally. But his criticisms against Hegel are not real. They're not genuine.
It ain't good.
They're not good. Yeah.
Mm.
We can explain that later. But